Okay, time for chapter 6 of A Wrinkle in Time. The Real Mr. Jenkins. Charles, Meg cried. All three Mr. Jenkinses held up warning hands and simultaneously, Charles Wallace Murray, what is it now? Charles Wallace looked with interest at the three men. Hello, what's this? Mr. Jenkins one said, what are you doing with that? All three men were visibly fearful of Louise. There was no telling the real Mr. Jenkins by a variation in response to the snake. Louise reared her head, half closed her eyes, and made the strange clacking warning sound which Meg had heard the night before. Charles Wallace stroked her soothingly and looked speculatively at the three men. We were supposed to bring a small pet to school today to share with the class. Meg thought, good for you, Charles, to think of Louise the larger. If you terrified Mr. Jenkins, that would send you up a notch in the other kids' estimation. There's one thing everybody in school agrees on, it's that Mr. Jenkins is a retarded rodent. Mr. Jenkins III said severely, you know perfectly well that small pets were meant, Charles Wallace, turtles or tropical fish or perhaps even a hamster. Or a gerbil, Mr. Jenkins II added. A gerbil would be acceptable. Why have you multiplied? Charles Wallace asked. I found one of you quite enough. Louise clapped again. It was a flesh-chilling sound. Mr. Jenkins III demanded, why aren't you in class, Charles? Because the teacher told me to take Louise the larger and go home. I really don't understand why. Louise is friendly and she wouldn't hurt anybody. Only the girls were scared of her. She lives in our stone wall by the twins' vegetable garden. Meg looked at Louise at the hooded eyes, the wary position of the head, the warning twitching of the last few inches of her black tail. Jenny had told them that Louise was a teacher. Louise herself had certainly shown in the past 24 hours that she was more than an ordinary garden snake. Louise did know, Meg was sure, the real Mr. Jenkins. Swallowing her own shyness of all snakes, she reached out toward Charles Wallace. Let me have Louise for a little while, please, Charles. But Prognoscus spoke in her mind. No, Meg. You have to do it for yourself. You can't let Louise do it for you. All right, she accepted that, but perhaps Louise could still help. Charles Wallace regarded his sister thoughtfully. Then he held out the arm around which Louise's lower half was coiled. The snake slithered sinuously to Meg. Her body felt cold and tingled with electricity. Meg tried not to flinch. Mr. Jenkins, Meg said, each one of you, one at a time, what are you going to do about Charles Wallace and Louise? Charles Wallace can't possibly walk home alone. It's too far. What are you going to do about Charles Wallace and school in general? Nobody volunteered an answer. All three folded their arms impassively across their chests. Mr. Jenkins III, Meg said. Are you naming me, Meg? That's right. I'm not naming anybody yet. I want to know what you're going to do. I thought I'd already told you. It is a situation which I shall have to guide carefully. It was foolish of Charlie to bring a snake to school. Snakes are quite frightening to some people, you know. Louise hissed slowly. Mr. Jenkins III turned visibly paler. He said, I shall have a long, quiet session with Charles Wallace's teacher. Then I will speak to each child in the first grade room separately. I shall see to it that each one has an understanding of the problem. If any of them group together and try bullying, I shall use strong disciplinary methods. This school has been run in far too lax and permissive a manner. From now on, I intend to hold the reins. And now, Charles Wallace, I shall drive you home. Your sister will bring your pet. Meg turned away from him. Mr. Jenkins II? Mr. Jenkins II detached himself by one pace from the others. Force! That's what that imposter is advocating. Dictatorship. I will never put up with dictatorship. But you should not have brought the snake to school, Charlie. You should have known better. But I think I understand. You thought it would enhance your social prestige and make you more of an equal in the eyes of your peers. There's where happiness lies, in success with your peer group. I want all my children to be like each other, so we must help you to be more normal, even if it means that you must go to school elsewhere for a while. I understand there's someone from another galaxy who's interested in helping you. Perhaps that's our answer for the time being. Meg turned to Mr. Jenkins I. He gave a small, annoyed Mr. Jenkins shrug. I really do not foresee much change in my relationship with Charles Wallace in the future. Why interplanetary travel should be thought of as a solution to all Earth's problems, I do not understand. We had sent men to the moon and to Mars, and we are none the better up for it. Why sending Charles Wallace a few billion light years across space would improve him any, I fail to see. Unless, of course, it helps his physical condition, about which nobody except myself appears concerned. He looked at his wristwatch. How much longer does this farce continue? May could feel sharp, painful little flickers as the cherubim thought it heard. She did not want to listen. It's all a waste of time, she cried. Why do I have to bother with all these Mr. Jenkinses? What can it possibly have to do with Charles? Louise the Larger's breath was cool and gentle against her ear. It does. It does, the snake hissed. Prognoscus said, You don't need to know why. Just go on with it. Charles Wallace spoke warily. Give me Louise, Meg, please. I want to go home. It's too far for you to walk. We'll take it slowly. Mr. Jenkins 3 said sharply, I've already said I will drive you home. You may take the snake as long as it stays in the back seat. Mr. Jenkins 1 and 2 said simultaneously, I will drive Charles Wallace and the snake. They shuddered slightly, not quite simultaneously, but in syncopation. Charles Wallace held out his arm and Louise slithered from Meg to the little boy. Let's go, he said to the three men, turned away from them and started to walk to where the faculty parked their cars. The three Mr. Jenkinses followed him, walking abreast, all with the stiff, ungainly gait which was distinctly and solely Mr. Jenkins. But who will we go with, Meg asked Prognoscus. The real one. But then, I think that when they turn the corner, there'll be only one of them. It gives us a small respite at any rate. The cherubim materialized slowly, becoming at first a shimmer, then a transparent outline, then deepening in dimension until he moved into complete visibility as the three Mr. Jenkinses disappeared. Don't waste time, he thought sharply at her. Think. What's the nicest thing you've ever heard about Mr. Jenkins? Nice? Nothing nice. Maybe all of them are imposters. Maybe they won't come back. Again, the sharp little pain. That's too easy. One of them's real, and for some reason, he's important. Think, Meg, you must know something good about him. I don't want to know anything good about him. Stop thinking about yourself. Think about Charles. The real Mr. Jenkins can help Charles. How? We don't need to know how, Meg. Stop blocking me. It's only our hope. It's our only hope. You must let me kithe with you. She felt himself moving about within her mind, more gently now, but persistently. You're still blocking me. I'm not trying to. I know. Do some math problems in your head. Anything to shut out your unlove and let me in about Mr. Jenkins. Do some math for Calvin. You love Calvin. Good. Think about Calvin, Meg. Calvin's shoes. Hold on just a sec. I have to pause. Okay, sorry about that. Do some math problems in your head. Anything to shut out your unlove and let me in about Mr. Jenkins. Do some math for Calvin. You love Calvin. Good. Think about Calvin, Meg. Calvin's shoes. What about them? What kind of shoes does he have on? His regular school shoes, I suppose. How would I know? I think he has only one pair of shoes and his sneakers. What are the shoes like? I don't know. I didn't notice. I don't bother much about clothes. Think some more math and let me show them to you. Shoes. Strong. Fairly new Oxfords, which Calvin wore over mismatched red and purple socks. The kind of shoes Mrs. O'Keefe could ill afford to buy for his family. Meg saw those shoes vividly. The image was given her by Prognoscus. She'd been quite truthful when she told him that she didn't notice clothes. Nevertheless, her mind registered all that she saw in it, and it was there, stored, available to the kithing of the cherubim. She saw with a flash of intuition that her kithing was like a small child's trying to pick out a melody on the piano with one finger, as against the harmony of a full orchestra, like the cherubic language. In her mind's ear came the echo of Calvin's voice, coming back to her from an afternoon when she'd been sent, unfairly, she thought, to Mr. Jenkins's office, and had been dealt with unfairly there. Calvin's voice, quiet, calming, infuriatingly reasonable. When I started 7th grade and went over to regional, my mother bought me some shoes from a thrift store. They cost her $1, which was more than she could spare, and they were women's Oxfords, the kind of black lace shoes old women wear, and at least 3 sizes too small for me. When I saw them, I cried, and then my mother cried, and my pop beat me. So I got a saw and hacked off the heels and cut the toes out so I could jam my feet in and went to school. The kids knew me too well to make remarks in my presence, but I could guess what they were sniggering behind my back. After a few days, Mr. Jenkins called me into his office and said he'd noticed I'd outgrown my shoes and he just happened to have an extra pair he thought would fit me. He'd gone to a lot of trouble to make them look used, as though he hadn't gone out and bought them for me. I make enough money in the summers now to buy my own shoes, but I'll never forget that he gave me the first decent pair of shoes I ever had. Sure, I know all the bad things about him, and they're all true. And I've had my own run-ins with him, but on the whole, we get along. Maybe because my parents don't make him feel inferior, and he knows he can do things for me that they can't. Meg muttered. It'd have been a lot easier if I could have gone on hating him. Now it was Prognoska's voice in her mind's ear, not Calvin's. What would be easier? Naming him. Would it? Don't you know more about him now? Secondhand, I've never known him to do anything else nice. How do you suppose he feels about you? He's never seen me except when I'm snarly, she admitted. She found herself almost laughing as she remembered Mr. Jenkins saying, Margaret, you are the most contumacious child it has ever been my misfortune to have in this office. And she had to go home and look up contumacious. Prognoska's probed, do you think he'd believe anything good about you? Not likely. Would you like him to see a different Meg? The real Meg? She shrugged. Well then, how would you like to be different with him? Frantically, she said, I wish I had gorgeous blonde hair. Yes, you wouldn't, not really. Of course I would. If you had gorgeous blonde hair, you wouldn't be you. That might be a good idea. Ouch, Progo, you hurt. This isn't any time for self-indulgence. When Mr. Jenkins is being nice, he's not being Mr. Jenkins. Being nice on Mr. Jenkins would be like blonde hair on me. Prognoska sent ice-cold anger through her. Meg, there's no more time. They'll be back any moment now. Panic churred in her. Progo, if I don't name right, if I fail, what will you do? I told you, I have to choose. That's not telling me. I want to know which way you're going to choose. Prognoska's feathers shivered as though a cold wind had blown through them. Meg, there isn't much time. They're on their way back. You have to name one of them. Give me a hint. This isn't a game. Mr. Jenkins was right. She shot him an anguished glance, and he lowered several sets of eyelashes in apology. Progo, even for Charles Wallace, how can I do the impossible? How can I love Mr. Jenkins? Prognoscus did not respond. There was no flame, no smoke, only a withdrawing of eyes behind wings. Progo, help me! How can I feel love for Mr. Jenkins? Immediately, he opened a large number of eyes very wide. What a strange idea. Love isn't a feeling. If it were, I wouldn't be able to love. Cherubim don't have feelings. But, idiot, Prognoscus said anxiously rather than crossly. Love isn't how you feel. It's what you do. I've never had a feeling in my life. As a matter of fact, I matter only with Earth people. Progo, you matter to me. Prognoscus puffed enveloping pale blue clouds. It's not what I meant. I meant that cherubim only matter with Earth people. You call it materializing. Then if you become visible only for us, why do you have to look so terrifying? Because when we matter, this is how we come out. When you got mattered, you didn't choose to look the way you do, did you? I certainly did not. I'd have chosen quite differently. I'd have chosen to be beautiful. Oh, I see. You mean you don't have any more choice about looking like a drive of deformed dragons than I do about my hair and glasses and everything. You aren't doing it this way just for fun? Prognoscus held 3 of its wings demurely over a great many of its eyes. I am a cherubim, and when a cherubim takes on matter, this is how. Meg knelt in front of the great, frightening, and strangely beautiful creature. Progo, I'm not a wind or a flame or fire. I'm a human being. I feel. I can't think without feeling. If you matter to me, then what you decide to do if I fail matters. I fail to see why. She scrambled to her feet, batting at the last wisps of pale blue smoke which stung her eyes, and shouted, Because if you decide to turn into a worm or whatever and join the Ecthro, I don't care whether I name right or not. It just doesn't matter to me. And Charles Wallace would feel the same way. I know he would. Prognoscus probed gently and thoughtfully into her mind. I don't understand your feelings. I'm trying to, but I don't. It must be extremely unpleasant to have feelings. Progo, what will you do? Silence. No flame, no smoke, all eyes closed. Prognoscus folded the great wings completely. His words were very small as they moved into her mind. X. If you fail, I will X myself. He vanished. Meg swung around, and 3 Mr. Jenkinses were walking towards her from the direction of the parking lot. She faced them. Mr. Jenkins. Identical, hateful, simultaneous, they stepped toward her. Mr. Jenkins once sniffed, the end of his pink nose wriggling distastefully. I am back. I left Charles Wallace with your mother. Now, will you please get rid of these two, pranksters? I resent this intrusion on my time and privacy. Mr. Jenkins, too, pointed to one accusingly. That impostor lost his temper and showed his true colors when your little brother brought a snake to school. The impostor forgot himself and called the child a delete, Mr. Jenkins 3 said sharply. He used words unsuitable for a child. Blip it. Mr. Jenkins 2 said, he doesn't love children. Mr. Jenkins 3 said, he can't control children. Mr. Jenkins 2 said, I will make Charles Wallace happy. Mr. Jenkins 3 said, I will make him successful. Mr. Jenkins 1 looked at his watch. May closed her eyes, and suddenly she did not feel. She'd been pushed into a dimension beyond feeling if such a thing is possible, and if Proga was right, it is possible. There was nothing but a cold awareness which had nothing to do with what she normally would have thought of as feeling. Her voice issued from her lips, almost without volition, cold, calm, emotionless. Mr. Jenkins 3. He stepped forward, smiling triumphantly. No, you're not the real Mr. Jenkins. You're much too powerful. You'd never have to be taken away from a regional school you couldn't control and make principal of a grade school you couldn't control either. She looked at Mr. Jenkins 1 and 2. Her hands were ice cold, and she had the sensation in the pit of the stomach which precedes acute nausea, but she was unaware of this because she was still in the strange realm beyond feeling. Mr. Jenkins 2, he smiled. Again, she shook her head. I wasn't quite as sure about you at first, but wanting to make everybody happy and just like everybody else is just as bad as Mr. Jenkins 3, manipulating everybody. Bad as Mr. Jenkins is, he's the only one of the three of you who's human enough to make as many mistakes as he does. This part always gets me. And that's you, Mr. Jenkins 1. Suddenly she gave a startled laugh. And I do love you for it. Then she burst into tears of nervousness and exhaustion, but she had no doubt that she was right. The air about the schoolyard was rent with a great howling and shrieking, and then a cold nothingness, which could only be the presence of ectroy. It was as though rip after rip were being slashed in the air, and then the edges were drawn together and healed. Silence and quiet, and a small, ordinary, everyday wind. Prognoscus materialized delicately, unfolding wing after wing to reveal his myriad various eyes. Mr. Jenkins 1, the real Mr. Jenkins, fainted. And we'll pause there.